Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the gentleman from Missouri for yielding me time. I also would like to thank the gentlelady, Ms. Moore from Wisconsin, for all her work on this bill. She's been dedicated and engaged and hardworking and willing to compromise to move this effort forward to help a lot of Main Street businesses that are in my district, her district, and that dot the map of America. I also want to thank Ms. Fudge and Mr. Gibson for their collaborative efforts and their work through the Agriculture Committee on this bill as well. Mr. Speaker, this bill is the culmination of over 2.5 years' work. In 2012, Ms. Moore, Ms. Fudge, Mr. Gibson, and I joined together to introduce legislation that clarified rules under the Dodd-Frank Act with regard to margin clearing and reporting requirements of inter-affiliate transaction. What that means is a lot of Main Street businesses in various industries, from agriculture to consumer products that work across international boundaries, use this central treasury unit structure to offset competing or offsetting risks, and that way they can decide what their total aggregate risk is and then make it much more affordable for a corporation. Unfortunately, under the Dodd-Frank Act and the way the rules were interpreted, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, these companies were being charged double or triple the cost by imposing these central clearing unit ways of managing risk. It just didn't make sense, and it actually cost them more money. These companies did not add systemic risk, and that's what the rules on swaps were all about, is to make sure we reduce systemic risk. These companies are using these swaps to offset risk to their company and their operating risks. And so this is a common sense piece of legislation. In fact, Barney Frank, the author of the Dodd-Frank legislation, spoke in favor of this when he was the ranking member in the last Congress. Unfortunately, there was no activity on the bill in the last Congress, and over the last 2 years, both the Securities Exchange Commission and the CFTC have worked with us, with Ms. Moore and I, on these rules. They've done a pretty good job in that regard, but there's more to be done because their rules left out the folks that use these centralized treasury units as a specific business model. And just last month, in fact, the CFTC published a no-action letter that Ms. Moore referred to, but a no-action letter means that it's still part of the law. We're just not going to enforce the law. What we need to do is fix the law. It's really common sense. So this bill that Ms. Moore introduced fixes the law for that centralized treasury unit way of doing business. It makes sense. It does not add any risk to the system, and it allows these companies that are all over America to manage their risk in a smarter way without being charged 2 or 3 times as much, and without risking that they are violating the law, even though it's not going to be enforced. So I applaud the gentlelady from Wisconsin for changing the law, fixing the law, making it work for a lot of small, medium, and even large businesses across America so they can use their cash to hire Americans in this tough time and hire more Americans and not waste it on unneeded cost that does not provide any safety to anyone. So I want to thank the gentlelady from Wisconsin and as well as the gentleman from New York and the gentlelady from Ohio for all their work, and I was proud to be a small part of this. I would urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.